So welcome everybody to Kajus Samizong Edinburgh, and we're going to be continuing with the amazing teachings of Akong RInpoche, which have been compiled into the book Restoring the Balance. But before we start with that, let's say the refuge prayer and attune our minds in a good place to receive the Buddha Dharma. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy and create the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion, free of bias to friends or enemies. Padan Sawelam Rinpoche, Dagi Chiwo Pinde di Shukla, Katrin Chimpo Gone di Sunde, Kusunta Chi Nudu Saltu Song. That prayer that we didn't say together is not written on this stage, but that's to prayer to my Guru, or the root Guru. So we're actually are. Okay, I'll just try and quietly put this under here. We're actually into session 6, or chapter 6 as it is in the book, which is titled Being Flexible is Being Alive. So all the teachings by Akong Rinpoche, his English is quite simple. He doesn't use a lot of long words or terminologies. And I always think there's a sort of slight danger of it seeming a bit too simple and it kind of goes over your head. So I would really, the reason why I like to present these teachings is to focus on certain things which, if you're just reading through it, you might miss, because they sound quite simple. There's no big words. There's nothing kind of academically shouting at you. So being flexible is being alive. We understand every word of that sentence, but do we get the meaning? We know the words, but do we have the meaning? Is it even true? Well, I mean, in the opposite, you could say would be, what's the opposite of flexibility? Is somebody who's flexible is somebody who's very stiff. And what do we call dead bodies? We call them stiffs, don't we? Sort of in slang, the stiffs. So they're straight away. You have something that you might not really register straight away, but yeah, the opposite of stiff is flexible. The opposite of death is life, isn't it? So that's really in terms of our body. And also, we know that if your body is flexible, you'll be more healthy than if it's very rigid and then stiff and can't move very much. But it's the same with the mind. Now, the mind obviously isn't a physical thing. It's not a thing you can show somebody or say, hey, oh, here's my mind. Do you like that? Do you like my mind? You can see, here's my body, but you can't say, here's my mind, because it's not physical. And nor is it subject to birth or death. It wasn't born, therefore it can't die. So, because it's not physical or subject to birth and death, it's harder to understand. But we can experience it. And it can also become rigid. Our minds can get very rigid, can't they? Because sometimes you think of somebody that's very broad-minded and easygoing and quite flexible in their ways. Or you can think of people that are very kind of stiff and kind of rigid in their thinking, or narrow in their thinking. Or we can be that as well. We can be that as well. Well, about different things, maybe. Sometimes you're rigid about something and flexible about something else. But it's in the mind that we experience it, and that's what we're mainly going to be looking into. Of course, they influence each other as well. The body influences the mind, and the mind influences the body. So sometimes if you have a certain rigidity of view in your mind, that will affect your body, and the other way around. So it can become rigid and fixed and conditioned. There's a lot of conditioning going on. We're conditioned all the time without we know it. We're not always aware of it. Most of the consumer society that we live in is based on conditioning people into buying different things and conditioning that they're not enough on their own, that they should have something, and then you'd be better off if you buy this. And, this is a form of conditioning. But also, even our education system, you could say has aspects of that as well. I mean, it has many good aspects, of course, and it depends on how it's put over. But the thing is that when we become very sort of conditioned, whether we realize it or not, we get kind of stuck into habits. So, for example, if you think, oh, I'm really stressed, I could do with a drink, or I could do with a cigarette, or something like that, and so you pick up something not very healthy, but you think you're relying on something other than your own ability to prop, if you like. And sometimes that can get out of hand, and you get really stuck in a negative or harmful habit. Or just a very narrow way of thinking, oh, I better not do that, and work out, well, last time I'm not going to do that anymore. And you kind of limit yourself. You sort of become very narrow. It's possible. So it can greatly, having that sort of rigid viewpoint can really diminish our lives. We become less open, less able to sort of approach life in an open way and be a bit more adventurous maybe than if we hadn't been a bit sort of fearful about, oh, this may happen, that may happen, and I better not do that, Of course, I'm not suggesting that you should take risks and sort of, go too extreme in the opposite side of things, but it can gradually and subtly diminish our lives and limit us. So the subtitle, oh, do you know what? I had a bookmarking this, and it must have fallen out. So, and now I don't have a bookmark. But my friend here has one of his credit cards, I believe. Probably could find something else, but I'm quite happy with your credit card. May not get it. Oh, it's only a coffee cup card. You probably won't get that one, but okay. So I'm going to look at this a bit more deeply. So there's a subtitle to this this chapter. So the main chapter is being flexible as being alive, and then there's a subtitle which says, we cannot change the world to conform to our wishes, but we can have mastery over how we experience it. Learning to accept and adapt will mature our minds. So that's a sort of going a little bit further than just saying being flexible as being alive. Of course, that doesn't mean to say that we have to agree with everything or become sort of doormats and say, oh, yes, of course, and just do everything. But at least we can learn to give others space, other people's points of view. We give it space. We may not always agree. That doesn't really matter whether we agree or not, but at least give them the respect and right to have a different point of view. And who knows, if they feel the same way about your point of view, maybe there could be a happy medium, or, we might find a really wise thing. So it's just allowing for adaptability of your own thinking and whoever else's. So what does he say? A rigid or narrow-minded person has difficulty in getting on with other people and with their own life. On the other hand, a broad-minded, flexible person will be able to fit in anywhere. Rinpoche, I was very fortunate to work with him on a daily basis when he was in Samiling, and we lived in Samiling. And I saw this all the time. So flexible, so accommodating. He listened to people. He gave people time. He didn't judge people, ever. And it was just a fantastic learning opportunity to see how it actually works. This is not just his words. This is how he lives. I say lives in the present tense, even though his body has died. But his mind is definitely not dead. So that's why I said the prayer to him at the beginning, and that's why I find it very difficult to speak in the past tense, because we're talking about his teachings here. And, when I think of him and some examples of it in our lives, I cannot put it in the past tense because I'm not saying I've got it all, as he well knows. but it was a great teaching to watch him in operation and how he lived his life. So, and he, just so many examples I could give, But anyway, he says, being flexible, we will be willing to adapt, to fit together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. It's not to say you have to be that same as that other jigsaw shape. No, you retain your own shape, but you can fit together. You can work together. You can make a fantastic picture together, rather than just being an odd shape on your own that you can't go in anywhere. So we have to see ourselves as part of the general life, the picture, the film, if you like. So you're saying this is also the attitude of someone who will carry a sleeping bag and be willing to sleep anywhere, willing to adapt to circumstances rather than resisting change. Don't take this too literally. It doesn't mean to say you've got to go and get yourself a sleeping bag and walk around with it. But, when somebody, you're happy to fit in here, or, maybe save somebody the bother of having to make the beds or something, take a sleeping bag if you've got one, if it's suitable. It's showing willing to. They might say, oh, no, don't bother, or, we have to make your bed. So we can't change the world we live in to conform to all our wishes just because we want it. The whole world is not going to do that. But we can have mastery of how we experience it. We can learn to accept and adapt, maturing our minds in the process. When you think about it, when as a baby or child is born, if they want something, and it's usually they want to be fed or they need to be changed, it's usually their needs are really more than their wants. But they cry, because they can't speak a language yet, so they just cry. And even when they can speak, it's, I want this, I want that, because they haven't learned that, they can't have everything. So we teach them as best we can, if we can. But the way that the society is, it wants your child to be begging you for chocolates at the checkout thing. That's why they're there, to send you more chocolate or whatever the thing is. So very often it creates difficulties for us, doesn't it? Same with the iPhones, like children have iPhones from a very young age because their friends have got it. Why their friends got it? Because they're marketed for children as well as adults. And so then it creates a big problem. We have to argue, no, I'm sorry, you can't have that. But why? So-and-so's got, and so we're having to kind of deal with this all the time. So it really requires awareness of what's going on here and sticking to your guns in some ways, but with flexibility and with wisdom, not just for the sake, because you're trying to do something good, and counteract the opposite forces of materialism by consumerism. And I don't think Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg is going to miss your child's iPhone income. So we can learn to accept and adapt, maturing our minds in the process. And if we are flexible and set a good example, others will follow it, even if not immediately. So already, if you can set a good example for your children, you see, that's the other thing is, well, you've got one. So then you have to come up with the argument, well, okay, well, when you're my age, you can have one as well, and maybe even before my age, if you're mature. So we have to kind of explain things and give the reasoning. But or if you're not forget about the children, park the children for one side, and if you're just in another situation, even if you come against somebody else's different opinion, just because you've been adaptable and sort of fit in with them, don't expect them to necessarily do the same for you. They may not be quite there yet, but sooner or later, at some point, they will have that as a good example. So, but don't just think that because you've been flexible, now it's their turn. Right, it's your turn. I've been really flexible. It's now your turn. I'm waiting. That's not flexible then, is it? You've suddenly gone rigid about your flexibility. So it has to come from a sincere place. That's the real flexibility. Whether they're flexible or not, that's what will set a good example. It's not just virtue signaling, it's actually you have become more flexible in your way, and that will have an effect. Maybe not straight away, but it will have an effect. So we can't wish to change other people or to impose our will or opinion on a situation. That's just ineffective, because we'll lose in the end. If we don't change or adapt, other people may also be obstinate as well. That's what happens, isn't it? On an individual life, I think, well, no, I'm sorry, this is the way it is. And then they're, well, no, you're totally wrong. This is the way it is. And we end up in an argument. Yeah, magnify that to a global scale, get a war. No side is, each side is not giving the other side an inch. They're just refusing to budge. That's war. So whether it's on an individual level or global level, it's counterproductive, extremely counterproductive, and doesn't end well. So if we train if you have too many expectations, it'll result in disappointment that may make us angry or sad. In other words, if we expect, because I've been, kind of adaptable, then I expect the other person to be adaptable. If you have that expectation, that's not a good attitude to have, because it'll lead to being disappointed if the other person doesn't come up with the goods. If they don't agree with your way of thinking, then you might feel angry or disappointed. So that's not the attitude to have. You can only master it for yourself and be a good example. Then it's up to the other person to either take it or not. You can't lay down the law about it. If we train our minds to be with things the way they are, free of expectations, then we create the basis for peaceful relationships and happiness. So whether it's in terms of vis-a-vis of somebody else or within a relationship thing, or just for yourself in a situation that you might find yourself in. Actually, there's when I've said that Rinpoche, who came over from Tibet and brought Tibetan Buddhism to the West with another Lama called Choje Akong Tulku. They were both very, very close, like brothers, and they were both young heads of their respective monasteries, and so they came together, and they really was what started the Tibetan Buddhist lineages in the West, and then from Samye it spread all over the world. So the other one, Choje Akong Tulku, wrote, "Disappointment is our chariot to enlightenment." I have personal experience of this because once I was, a lot of people from Tibet, from Samye that I was living there with, mainly monks and nuns, were going to Tibet on a pilgrimage with Akong Rinpoche. And I thought, oh, maybe if I could somehow get the money together, maybe I could also go. Quite a few people I knew were going, and I thought I would try hard, And because I knew Rinpoche very well, I asked him, I said, oh, would I be able to go then? Thinking it, you'd probably say yes, because why not? There's allowed lots of other people to go. And he just said no. And I was like, and he didn't give any explanation as to why I couldn't go. And I was like really hurt by it, like, why can't they let me? And then later that day, I went back to my room, and I had this book by Choje Akong Tulku, and I just thought I'd just open it, and it fell open, and the heading in the chapter was "Disappointment is our chariot to enlightenment," which consoled me somewhat because I was so disappointed. I thought I'm bound to get enlightened now. Even if I don't make Tibet, I'll show them when they come back. I'll be sitting there like the Buddha. Not quite, but it did console me somewhat. So we need to see that our disappointment is not an obstacle. I'm not saying that it will get you to enlightenment in like the next day, but it can be a really good thing to learn from. So it's more like I see it now as more like a signpost. Okay, so if you're feeling really disappointed, things have not gone the way you expected, like expecting to say yes. But if we really look into why we have this deep disappointment, we could also reach a deeper understanding of why we were mistaken expecting to satisfy all our wants and desires. So I want to go to Tibet. And then something stops, and then, okay, well, what's going on here then? So I didn't know the exact answer to that particular question, but I started to delve into it. And what does he mean? Why does he put disappointment as your chariot to enlightenment? So it kind of stuck in my head, and I was like thinking about it. Anyway, the next day I went back to Samye. I was in the office of Rinpoche. I wasn't going to bring the subject up anymore, but he just said, because he hadn't even said why, but he said, about the Tibet thing. He said, your time will come. You'll be able to go another time. And this time it's better that you stay here. And that was enough to like lessen the blow, okay, well, he seems to think that if he says that, I'm sure he must think that I will go at some point. And it did turn out that while that they were all away, I was really the only one that was working with Rinpoche that was left in Samye. And then, of course, there were a lot of other people, but I was sort of in the office with him. And that an incident happened that I had to deal with. Quite a serious incident, which I'm not going to go into, but I was there. And Rinpoche could see ahead. You could see into, future possibilities that might happen. And I think he had an inkling that I would be needed there. And that's what happened. And then the very next year, somebody gave me some money to go to Tibet. So I went the very next year, and I was able to go to Mount Kailash, which wasn't on the agenda of the other people. So I mean, it all worked out well in the end. So there you are. That was. I didn't get enlightened, but I did get to bed. So we never know how it's going to. If you can have a bit of maturity, basically, and not just expect everything to conform to your wishes because you want it, that's like childish behavior, isn't it? There's another thing in a Tibetan saying, which you may have heard, which is, if you want to set out on a journey, you don't need to pay the entire journey, like say from here to Tibet with leather, so that your feet don't get hurt. You don't do that, don't you? You don't pay all the miles, thousands of miles with leather. You put leather on your feet. You put shoes on. So in other words, you adapt to yourself. With your feet, you don't expect the entire world to adapt because you're going somewhere. That's the saying. Yeah, does that make sense? I have this mental picture like this long little like staircase of leather. All the animals had to die to do that. Anyway, yeah. So that's quite a well-known saying. So the advice is really to train our minds to be with things the way they are. That's to train with things the way they are, free of expectations, and in that way, we create the basis for peaceful relationships and happiness. When your relationships with others are peaceful, and you're not saying everybody's the same and you like this one bit more than the other one is fine, but if you have that open attitude, your life will be a whole lot more peaceful and therefore happier. You fit in. A lot of the time when people come and see me about their problems, one of the major ones is fitting in at work with other people at work. So, and it's not to say that you're going to like everybody the same or anything like that, but give them the space to disagree. And they will maybe give you that space as well, or maybe they won't. But at least you're doing your best to make a good atmosphere. And therefore, there's a higher chance of it being a better atmosphere and situation in general. So the next bit that the sort of subheading is going beyond ego clinging. The door is not locked. And so, because if you think about, well, if you've got very fixed point, no, it's this way, it's my way or the highway kind of, that's a very egotistical way of thinking, isn't it? It's like, I'm right, you can't possibly be right. I'm right. So that's the ego. And he's saying, go beyond that, clinging to that egotistical way of being. And it's not, he said, it's not like the door's locked. You can open that door. The ego is very fond of habitual ways of seeing things and of rigid ways of gaining satisfaction. We love clinging to our patterns and ways of thinking. We get kind of used to it. It's almost like it's our habits, the way that we're thinking. It's our habits. So we're not just talking about things like smoking and drinking and drugs, It's our habitual way of thinking that can be really an obstacle because it becomes entrenched. But we sort of derive a false sense of security from these habits, even though they can cause us to live limited lives. It's like someone staying in confinement, even though the door's not locked. It's like we imprison ourselves in this rigid way of thinking. It's like the door is locked, but we've locked it. Nobody else has locked it by being rigid. And we have to think about ourselves here, because it's always very easy to point it out in others. Oh, they're really rigid the way they are. I'm not. I'm very, we're the ones that we work on, not the other people, except maybe by example. So, And this is what causes us to limit our lives. It's like someone staying in confinement, although the door's not locked and there's no external force holding them back from what? From realizing their potential. And what is that? What is that potential? Buddhahood. The prayer we say at the beginning. It's all about, we want to become who we truly are, which is sane like Buddha. So when we limit ourselves like that, we're putting our own blocks. It's not anyone doing that to us. That's why it's so important to be honest with yourself. Not beat yourself up, just notice what needs to be tuned in, changed. The good stuff, that's fine. Leave that. That's good. But the obstacles that we create for ourselves, that's where we need to put the attention, and we can do that. You don't need to be judgmental, just observe. There's no sense of exploring new ground or expanding horizons. Instead, we hold on to whatever makes us feel cozy and secure. That's what we tell ourselves. Meanwhile, the whole of life goes on beyond these limits. So we can lock ourselves away from life by clinging to fixed patterns of mind. It's like we get so used to a certain way of thinking that we create these rigid and kind of deep trenches of thinking. I think there's a word, what is it, cognitive something or other patterns that we get used to. It's like, if you're walking from A to B and you constantly take the same path, you don't ever go that way or that. So you're gradually wearing that path really, really deep. And that's the way I know, and that's the way I'm going. I know that A gets to be there. We did it this morning. I don't want to drive that way but that wasn't about us. That was the roadblocks that are such a famous feature of life in Edinburgh. That was actually intelligent thinking, not aggressively for what I'm trying to talk about a bit. Okay, so we can lock ourselves away from life by clinging to these fixed patterns. We can see that an egotistical mindset holds us back. It limits us. It's not somebody else limiting us. We're limiting ourselves, clinging to fixed patterns of behavior, imprisoned by our habits, instead of realizing our Buddhist potential. Well, instead of realizing our Buddhist potential of self-liberation, we settle for self-limitation. I mean, that's not really very bright of us, is it? It's really not. We're creating that problem for ourselves. Instead of self-liberation, self-limitation, because we're stuck in the same old ways, trying to fit in with a superficial society. That's the other thing. The society we're trying to fit in with works on quite a superficial level, labeled, categorized, boxed in. So sometimes it's not just us creating it, but our situation is also creating it by the way the society functions. Some of those things. In fact, so much else to say about that. Most of us feel comfortable in our lifestyles despite its consequences. Even thinking through the consequences may seem like too much work. Our habits become a kind of security and refuge. We're familiar with that, isn't it? And so anything else seems a bit, I don't know what will happen if I do that, or, I might not do the other, And so we have this constant stream of thoughts and concerns that make us unhappy and has negative consequences, but we're reluctant to change, and so we just carry on in the same old way. We become fearful. And, I'm sorry to go on about the consumer society, but it works on that premise. If you're fearful, if you're not confident, if you feel you need, I've got to have one of those because they've got one and it's worked for them, so I better buy one of those, and I might need one of those while I'm at you end up thinking that you're never enough, that you have to have more things. Or or go prescribed routes through life that may not suit you. So you need to be a bit braver to break free of the habits. Of course, some things that we do are wise, and we don't want to break free of that. So you have to look at, with intelligence. But just to keep doing things because we're carrying on the same or ways, a lot of the time is spent fitting in with the superficial demands of our society. The very superficial side. Modern society calls for structures so that everything's in a category and labelled. These days, it's when Rinpoche gave his teachings probably about 20 years ago, when you think of how much more so it is these days. This is the days before, very high tech, or certainly before AI, and all the channeling that were kind of put through, like Pavlov's dogs or something. You get a reward if you buy this, and it's frightening, really. But it's more frightening if you don't do anything about it. Yeah, so with modern society calls for structures, everything's in a category, labelled. Our work is usually determined according to our education, very often. Likewise, our lifestyle is determined by our job. So convention really stifles our possibilities and limits us. If we're a company director, we have to have a particular kind of car. If we're a road sweeper, we shouldn't have that car, Oh, that can't be right, They're not fitting in with the label. Inwardly, we might feel completely different from the role that's been ascribed to us. As a result, we can become confused, and a great deal of misunderstanding and suffering may arise because we perceive everything to be so fixed and rigid. It isn't. It isn't. It's only fixed and rigid if we agree that it's fixed and rigid, if we subscribe to it. What's that about? I'm not saying rebel, I'm saying what you say. I think you say is open your eyes, look for yourself. Just because somebody says something, you don't have to agree. You don't have to turn them into your way of thinking, but look deeply at what is going on here internally in your way of thinking and also in the society around you. Is it useful? Is it not? Is it healthy? Is it not? Some of it is, some of it definitely isn't. Some of it might be good for one person, but not another, and that other might be you. So, in other words, if you're open and you don't grab onto whatever is being put in your way just because somebody has said that, it just demands some courage. But the alternative is not great. So, yeah. So, I think the time, you see, in our society, mental stress has very few ways of natural relief. People take refuge in remedies that can be harmful in the long term, such as excessive smoking and drinking or drugs. Or we busy ourselves with addiction to entertainment. Watching TV is an addiction, isn't it? I mean, very often we end up watching, and I include it myself, it's something we don't even like. We just, when I'm not watched it for a while, in fact, if I'm doing retreats, I definitely don't go anywhere near. I actually cover it up. I don't want to even know it exists because they are addictive. And maybe we get home and we're stressed and whatever. Oh, I've got no energy. You just sit in front of the box, There's your precious life going away. Ooh, fritter, fritter, fritter. Even our hobbies can be so complicated that they leave us feeling exhausted, like video games, flight simulators, killing games. People spend hours, days, nights killing each other virtually. that's gonna not a great look, is it? So whether we drink too many cups of tea or coffee, or burn our mouths and have too much whiskey, or play incessant video games, these are all simply ways of releasing our tension, but we must find other solutions because they in themselves are harmful. Too much. So basically, mental health becomes mental sickness. Often when you hear the words mental health, on the radio something about mental health, it's not actually not really talking about mental health, they're talking about mental sickness. Usually, if somebody's mentally healthy, you don't really mention it, do you? You just sort of, they're okay. But you hear the words mental health, and actually what that means is mental sickness or imbalance. And because today's consumer society is so unnatural, we become disconnected from nature. We become, especially in an urban environment, we become disconnected from the natural world and our natural mind's capacity to find balance. Why? Because it's being distracted all the time by bombardments of buy this, do that, have that label. I know you did that. You must be one of those. Just constantly being corralled like cattle or something, corralled. And so we lose that capacity for our mind to find equilibrium itself because it's never been left alone. It's always bombarded and busy. That's why meditation is so important. And when people come to meditate, the thing they find the hardest is to do nothing. Because they're always doing something. They almost feel guilty about if you're doing nothing. But when you do nothing, it doesn't mean to say you like in front of the TV, just mindlessly that gulping, but doing nothing with awareness, really aware of not doing. Because we're human beings, we're not human doing. They're called human beings for a reason. We're supposed to be, and then sometimes we do, but we don't. We can stop doing and just be, learn how to be, and find out who we truly are. And that's really what meditation does for you. You discover yourself, your natural self, not the work person or the addicted person or the busy person, but the person that's underneath all of that stuff that we don't even know because we never give it a chance to breathe. So that's why I think, meditation is so important these days, especially. Another thing you can do is to connect with the natural world. We're in a city here in Edinburgh. We're lucky that there are green spaces, beautiful trees that you can connect with. I really think it's so healthy to do that. I do that a lot, especially if I'm working on, I work. I'm on the computer a lot. I'm busy doing so. I'm really busy. But I find, either through meditation or through connecting with nature, there's other things you can do, yoga and Tai Chi and things like that. But things that are natural, that you're not requiring any equipment or anything, it's just you, your body, your mind, but you've got enough. You're qualified. So mental health becomes mental sickness. Today's consumer society is so unnatural. We come disconnected from our natural capabilities to balance ourselves. So we look for help in the wrong places. And instead of tuning in to our own body and mind, which is what we do in meditation, we don't know to do that because we almost feel guilty for doing nothing. I'm just sitting and doing nothing. I should be doing something. We've lost we think this, we feel bad. We should be doing something, surely. But we end up distracting ourselves to switch off. We just distract ourselves. We go to the films, we watch something. It's like burying your head in the sand like an ostrich, burying your head. You don't know what's going on with your mind, with your body, because you're constantly, even when you're relaxing, so-called relaxing, you're not actually relaxing. You're watching something, you're listening to something, you're doing something. Like the ostrich burying its head in the sand. You never get to know what's going on with yourself, And that becomes a habit. So we must find another solution. Okay. Flexibility of choice in the path we take. So here we're talking about taking responsibility for our own life. And in a positive way, not just relying on the habits that we've done since we were adult. So the best way. Okay, so this is the different ways to benefit and balance every human being. Some people think there's only one way for everybody, but that's the wrong attitude. There are different ways for different stroke for different folk. The best way of introducing balance into our lives is to respect the uniqueness of every individual. Each individual is different. Just because you do something doesn't mean I've got to do the same thing. I'm different. I'll have a different way of balancing myself. Everybody's different. And this is another thing I really saw with Rinpoche. He was also a doctor of Tibetan medicine, as well as an enlightened being. But, people would come, and I remember there was one woman who was she was a journalist, and she was interviewing him, and she was asking him about the Tibetan medicine and this, and he's a doctor, and what do you do, And he says, I listen. He listens. He really listens. Then you get to know somebody. Well, if somebody is really being listened to, it's rare. It's really rare. So he's really being listened to. They will come forth with more information that they even knew that they had about themselves. They even didn't listen to themselves. We don't listen to ourselves, let alone anybody else. So when you really listen with mindful listening, present, fully present, that's what, and the secret was to listen, and then you get to know that we tend to jump in. Oh, I think that must be this, and it must be that, and if you go to see a doctor, you have 10 minutes, if you can't get anything over in 10 minutes, and you're aware because look at the watches, or you feel sorry for them as well, and you think, I better not take up too much time. It's time becomes an issue, and you can't be relaxed or really bring things out that way. So listening is extremely important. And so, and that's the way that we get to know the uniqueness of each person. So the best way is to respect the uniqueness of each individual. For example, for a dancer, somebody who's good at dancing or is a dancer, sitting still all the time is a nightmare for that person. You can't say, no, you really need to sit still and meditate. That's not the way for them. Maybe they do meditate as well, but for their job, if it entails sitting down all the time, that's not going to go well if their talent is for dance, It's to be a nightmare though. So the main thing is that, have you got an interest in whatever the job is that you're going to be doing? You need to be interested. You need to be engaged. You need to have a look for it. So we have got some choice. We don't need to put ourselves into to balance ourselves. We don't need to see they're doing it that way, so maybe I should do it that way. That's like creating a straitjacket for ourselves. Like a one-size-fits-all. It might become something completely different for us. We need to follow our interests and do what makes us feel engaged and happy, and not sort of shoehorn ourselves into shoes that don't fit, like, somebody's expectations. And unfortunately, and this runs in families a lot, the mother and father want the child to be like this, but, it doesn't actually suit the child. They may not have talent in that respect. They might be really talented in another respect. Even the Buddha suffered from this, isn't it? But his whole life was an example of going your own way. Because he was born into a royal family. His parents wanted him to stay in that kind of environment and become a great world leader, which is what was prophesied by the sage when his mother was pregnant. Either he'll be a great world leader or he'll be a holy man and go begging for his food and stuff like that. Well, of course, as they're the king and queen, they want him to be in the family business, stay in the royal family. So they did everything to make that happen. But eventually, when he became old enough, he left. He went his own way, and thank goodness he did. So, otherwise, we wouldn't be here now in this environment. So, yeah, be careful if you're a parent. Don't try to mold your children too much into what you want. See what they're good at and encourage that and their interests. And for yourself, the same. Don't feel yourself getting shoehorned into something that really isn't fitting you. It's not going to be good. So interest is the main thing. The appropriate method for balancing ourselves is blended with that interest, so that a person, you don't have to throw away your own ideas. You take on board other ideas. So as well, but you blend it and you're able to bring a balance. It's not saying you're right, I'll just be really selfish, I'll do it, not take any consideration about other things. So it's a blend of your situation, your education, but also definitely the main thing is your own interest and engagement. And then you can really benefit. So there's many different tried and trusted methods according to the different capabilities and inclinations of beings, but all we have to do is to choose the appropriate way of balancing our own lives and use that. And after making our choice, well, we stay with it as best we can. If it's working for us, we stay with it. Then we're looking now at, okay, so that's what we need to do. But we also have to be aware that there are cultural differences, there are societal differences. And we are living in a society, so it's not just only about us, but we do still have to function within society. But cultural prejudices also produce rigid attitudes. So, for example, every society in the world, wherever it is, whatever country it is, whatever place it is, it has established customs and traditions, and they're all different. The ones in Lancashire are not the same as the ones in Yorkshire, let alone the ones in Timbuktu or somewhere far away, And when people of different cultures meet, complications can arise because they're not familiar with each other's customs. And then if you've got a very closed attitude, then it can bring about prejudice. Oh, I don't know what they're doing that for. We don't do it like that. Why are they doing it like that? That's a stupid way to do it. You become critical. It can be like that, isn't it? We do it with people. If you're not familiar with a certain type of person, that's where racial prejudice comes from, isn't it? You don't, oh, I don't know, they look different. I'm not sure I like that. It's so crazy, it's stupid, isn't it? But that's what happens. So he gives some examples here. When different people of different cultures meet, complications can arise, and with that, prejudice. So, for example, when we see a person for the first time, eye communication usually takes place, isn't it? It's involuntary. You just look at someone in the eye. And we may anticipate what we consider the normal kind of communication is. How their eyes respond. We don't think this, we just do it naturally because that's how it is in our society. How their eyes respond to ours. It's just a thing that we have. But what if the other person looks away or does something we're not expecting them to do? Maybe they, I don't know, like in Tibet in the old days, they used to pull their toes out. And I think that was to show that they weren't hiding anything or something like that. It was an old custom. I don't think they still do it. Maybe they still do. I don't know. I've got nothing in my I'm not quite sure what it was. I should pick a different example. But the point is that however the other person may look away or do something different, we may take it personally or we get a bit suspicious. Maybe they're up to something. Why are they looking like that? So we develop a little bit of resistance to that person. I'm not sure about them, though. A bit odd, So not having had our expected response. We expected one kind of response, we got a different kind of response. Oh, it throws us. If you're a bit upset, what's the opposite of balance is being a bit off balance, upset. So not having our expected response from the first eye communication, we then may go on to find it a bit difficult to talk with them. I'm not so sure about this one, So you get a bit reluctant to even engage any further. Speech communication is not only based on words, but on rhythm, volume, vibration. So even if with the same language, but in a different accent, different kind of vibration, different stress on different words, if they don't fit our expectations, again, this influences our mind and our attitude to that person. We start to form a fixed picture of how the other person is, and we relate to our projection on the basis of these first impressions. So you meet somebody, they didn't look at you in the way you thought they normally would. They said something in a bit of a weird way. You start to build up a kind of negative response to this person. They're not done anything bad to you other than be different to you and different to your expectations. And then he sort of gives another example. It's a bit like a joke when you say, so a Scotsman, a Chinese person, and an Eskimo walk into a pub. I mean, it's not that example, but it is three different people. So he didn't say they walk into a pub. If they're going to shake hands, for example, they all do different things. So a Chinese person, they might do a little bow, don't they? Or Japanese also do a little bow from the waist. Whereas an Eskimo might want to rub your nose with the nose, they rub noses. Very different. The Scotsman certainly wouldn't do either of those things. So just right there, before you've even got to know each other, you're doing something completely different. And that's really weird, So with these deeply embedded, rather than becoming friendly, we end up fighting. We've not even said hello yet, and we're already like, so kind of feeling animosity. And with these deeply embedded ways, it's like behaving like a mouse in a cage, like a conditioned, because we're conditioned to our way, just as they're conditioned to their way, and each one thinks their way is the right way. But we're like Pavlov's mice or something. You've had your conditioning; it must be the right one, and they think the same. And so there's no communication, there's no openness. Everybody's closed in their little tight world. Whereas, so if you go traveling, you're not going to, what you're going to do, you're going to stay in the hotel, in the safe confines of the hotel. You daren't go out in case you meet someone who's completely different to you. You never get to know the people of that country because, or, I'll just stay where I know. English people, they go like they have to have fish and chips where they go and eat. Maybe not so much now, but that used to be what it's like. You go to a different country, you have to have your own kind of food and this and I think people are more experimental now. But there'll definitely be some places like that and some people like that. And we are some of them. That's the important thing. It's very easy to point the finger, but we have to look at where our little foibles are. So when we are in an international group of people, it's easier to understand that there are many different ways of greeting and socializing with others. If you regularly meet with other people of different cultures, then you have a much more open. In fact, you get really inquisitive. You want to know more. You're like, oh, how's that work? It becomes a plus, not minus. It's like variety. Oh wow, I didn't know that happened. Can you teach me how to do that? We're a good example of it. I don't think I was brought up to wear this or sit in a room like this or speak like this. So, but I think through traveling and being open, and I have a different faith to my parents have and things like that. But, it's fine. It's all good. So sometimes we're so trapped in our conditioning that we may carry our prejudices and misunderstandings with us wherever we go. Deeply entrenched in our own point of view, we're unable and unwilling to understand the ways of others. It's like it becomes a threat. Things that are different we feel it like it's like a threat. Or someone with a different viewpoint. We don't even have to travel for that. Oh, how can you read that newspaper? Don't you know that's a ragged sort of baron? Just anything. Somebody has a different point of view and you don't agree with that point of view and you argue about that. As a result, it's like there's big explosions in the mind. How am I able to cope with this? My way is the only, it's the right way. All the other ways are wrong. This attitude can cause us big problems. We know it when we encounter it in others, don't we? How can they say that? They're so rigid. But we have to look this way. Turn the focus inward. So we have to go beyond that. We put ourselves in that prison. We can escape from that prison. That is exactly, if we look at the way Buddha did, that's what he did. He escaped the palace. That was a very luxurious prison, but it was still a prison. And he escaped. And it became Buddha. So we need to go beyond prejudice. Until the mind is aware that appearances can be deceptive and that social customs are very superficial, they're quite superficial. There's nothing inherently, this is right, that was wrong. It's just customs that have evolved over time. And they're not solid and they're not constant and they will change. So we don't have to hold on to these prejudiced beliefs about others. It's like you're locking others in a box. You've locked yourself in a box. You're locking the others in a box. Stamped it with the label, and they can't move, and you can't move, and nothing happens. Just unhappiness happens. So once it is aware, the mind will start overruling the feelings of or experiences that we anticipated. As it widens its horizons, the mind becomes more flexible, more adaptable, more accepting. When we look beyond the superficial, we look in a different way. It's like letting in the fresh air and fresh opinions. Then we can acknowledge that there are many, many ways of thinking in this world. And rather than seeing it as a threat, it can be a very enriching experience. It's not a threat that somebody has a different point of view or knows different things. Oh, right. Try that. And how does that work? So you have a positive outlook and see it as an enrichment rather than a threat. In other words, you're looking with a loving openness rather than fear and closed, kind of attitude. And also, we don't have to remain glued to one particular belief or faith. There are so many different systems and philosophies. We can go beyond that very narrow idea that I have to believe this because my friends believe this, or my parents believe this, or my family won't like it if I do something different. Or this is a cause of sickness, and we have to go beyond it. There's a need to become broad-minded and cease to hold rigid opinions if we are to evolve and develop our full potential as human beings. It's as if we were wrapped tightly in a restricting cocoon of our cherished beliefs, resisting unnecessary transformation into a butterfly. We've wrapped ourselves in the cocoon and we can't fly anymore. We've got so accustomed to this cocoon that we're afraid to spread our wings. And our lives become stunted and poor compared to what they could be. So if we want to be well, we have to be well by our own efforts. I'm doing that in mind, especially if we want a well mind, it's coming from us. That's not to say you can't help and receive help, but it's by our own efforts that we discover the potential of our own mind. Buddha cannot give you a magic wand and say, right, I wish that you all get enlightened straight away. You all become Buddha. You realize your Buddhahood. It's impossible. We have to do it for ourselves. He can point the way and has pointed the way if we follow the way, but the way is according to our own disposition. You know, we don't live in a palace. We don't need to escape the palace walls. We have some different kind of walls we have to escape. So not take it too literally, but adapting that freedom for ourselves. We have to set ourselves free. So I think now we've come to a point of reflection. I think we've talked quite a lot about all the different aspects of this. I think now we can come to a time for reflection. And Rinpoche talks about this way of developing maturity and flexibility. The two go together. It's having a mature attitude, not the childish attitude of, I want this and I want it now, but a mature attitude, which is flexible. So maturity in this sense means being able to face and deal with whatever's happening to us. Sometimes there'll be pleasant things happening. Sometimes there'll be unpleasant things happening. Sometimes it'll be just neutral. We'll get a bit of everything, that's for sure. So it means being able to face and deal with whatever's happening to us, both out in the world and within our own mind. When we are mature in this way, we become more flexible. Why? Because we learn to accept and adapt to changing situations. One thing we can be sure of doesn't change is that everything's going to change. There's always change. And that's good, because if it didn't change, it'd be dead, wouldn't it? Everything would just die. It'd just be So there's change. And some things we might like, some things we may not like. It's not about whether we like or not like. The point is to become adaptable and use that situation without feeling that everything has to always be exactly in accord with our own wishes and ideas, and the paving the world with leather. So let's actually do a little bit of reflecting meditation. So it's okay if you're sitting in a chair, but you do need to straighten up your back. You need to bring your body forward on the chair so your feet are flat on the ground and you're not leaning on the back of the chair. And if you're out on a cushion or kneeling, that's fine. But in all of the cases, we need to have a straight back. So we're not slumping like this. So you need to straighten up your back and you need to have the eyes open. Yes. And then just let the chin drop slightly. And just relax the eyes. You don't need to be looking at anything. Okay. And then, so imagine at the top of your head, you see, if you look up, you see that light source, the couple are above our heads? Yes? And then don't look up, but imagine this part of your head, the top of your head, is reaching upwards. Imagine you're being suspended from there, really growing up like a tree growing towards the light. So that way it will straighten out your back, but in a very natural way, not like a military kind of stiff back, but just as if you're a tree growing and you feel all your vertebrae kind of aligned. And then, so either way, if you're kneeling, sitting, or sitting on the chair, that's fine. You can either have your hands resting, that's where they naturally fall, near your knees, or you can have them in your lap. If they're in your lap, then the right one on top of the left, the thumb tips just gently touching. I find with the chairs, sometimes the arms of the chairs get in the way a bit, so just not holding them is just let your hands in your laps. That's great. And then just drop the chin slightly, and then just relax in that position. And focus a little bit on your breathing. Just let everything calm down. So we'll begin in a very simple way. Just rest the eyes looking downwards. You don't have the head too tilted. It's only slightly tilted, yeah. So a simple contemplation can help us develop these qualities of maturity and flexibility. So just get yourself comfortable, relax, sitting still, and resting your body, resting your mind, but resting them with awareness. You're not falling asleep. On the contrary, you're really being awake. But you're sort of changing the focus to be aware of what's going on inside. So you notice you can drop any physical tension. If you notice your body is tense in any way, tune into it. Let go of any tension. Notice your breathing. Breathing normally through the nose, but with a bit more awareness. Breath coming down into your lungs, your diaphragm, your belly. Relax your belly, allow it to swell with each in-breath and deflate as you let go of the out-breath. Tuning into your body, allowing it to relax while maintaining a good posture. And let the mind also relax. Slowing down, going deeper. And observing your mind. So you're sitting still, and mind's, well, that's maybe not so still. Notice how thoughts come into your mind. That's fine. You don't need to block them, but you do need to notice them. Try not to fidget. Keep your body still, your mind still, and watch it. You're using the mind to watch the mind, and you do observe whatever thoughts arise or feelings. Observe them without blocking them or chasing after them. Just try to notice them all, allowing them to flow by freely, like a river flowing by, without latching on to one or another. And just let them all flow. And whatever thoughts come, let them come and go freely. That's in their nature, to come and go, as long as you don't chase them. Let them flow freely and just relax your mind. Just be mindful and observe whatever is in your mind. and allow the thoughts to come and go without trying to change them, without blocking them, and without judging. So welcome to the art of doing nothing. What is being more aware. So if you do this regularly, every day, you will notice how in life you often want to change things because they are not, but simply because, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because they're not in accordance with how you think they should be. You'll notice this in yourself. You'll notice how often you want to change things, not because there's something wrong, but because they are not in accordance with how you think they should be. This is how immature and rigid minds create difficulties and problems in life. So we all need to take this on board because, of course, you may be in a situation where something is wrong. So then that's okay. You deal with whatever it is you need to deal with. But how many times you find fault with something that isn't wrong? It may not be to your liking, but it's not a wrong thing because somebody's slightly got a different point of view or dresses in a different way or whatever it is. You know, it's just not what you would do, but there's nothing wrong with it. Mostly it's like that, but we find faults all the time. And that's how we create problems in life. It also creates imbalance because if it doesn't like something, it creates the idea that's bad. Or if it does like it, oh, that was good. I like that, I don't like that. And in this way, the mind is unable to flow freely and accept things in the world in a positive way. It's like you're prejudging. You've got this sort of guard up, you know, and you're predisposed to see things as something not right because it's not exactly what you would do or the way you think of what you expect. When I say you, I mean us. And it's not easy to get out of habits. We know that, don't we? So this is why it takes maturity. This is how you become mature, by facing the way things actually are, outwardly and most importantly inwardly, because we see everything through that lens of our misconceptions and things. So everything is going to get covered by that, by our prejudices or, you know, sort of predestined way of seeing things. We're not open enough to just be, you know, like when there's a lovely metaphor for this. It's like when a small child goes into a temple or, you know, come into this room. Actually, this room has got it. People go, wow, that's like a child coming into a new environment. You know, you're not saying you like it, you don't like it. It's just like, wow. You come to it fresh. You don't feel threatened by it. You feel, oh, this is different, but it's kind of different in a good way, sort of thing, a positive way. So to have that attitude in life, you're much more open. That doesn't mean to say you don't see something that's wrong, but you're open to what can be really good in life. You welcome experience. You don't prejudge it on the basis of what you did 2 years ago or whatever it was. You know, you don't become a creature of habit that limits you. Yeah, that's really what we're talking about here. So instead of judging and interfering with everything, if we allow our thoughts and feelings to flow through freely, you know, just you're not, oh, I like this thought, that thought, and leave them going. You know, you just allow the flow to be a flow. It's like we're opening the floodgates of our mind, and when we allow our mind to be open and free, then we are freed. We free ourselves. No one's going to do it for us. Yeah, we're going to do it for ourselves. This is the way. But of course, we have great teachers and people who can guide us, but ultimately it's down to us. We are in the driving seat if we allow ourselves to be in the driving seat and not just get mindlessly driven hither and thither. So it's a very empowering way of seeing things, really. We are empowered if we choose to taste it. Okay, so I think that's enough me speaking and all bit with Rinpoche's words. I think that's the end of that chapter anyway. So let's say the dedication. Dedicate the merit of our practice. So it's the prayer at the end, at the bottom of the page. Dedication of merit. So whatever merit has come from this session and from our thinking about this and meditating on it, reflecting on it, and whatever's to come in the future. Remember, he does say it works if you do it regularly. It doesn't work once. Oh, that's funny. I'm not enlightened. I'm not even open. You have to do it to be it. You did, and then do nothing. Do nothing. Also do nothing, which is basically the meditation sound. Okay, shush. Let's dedicate the marriage and share whatever goodness has come with all sentient beings without exception. Through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Usanandi chanche zikpani, tokne nipe jana pamcheni, jigana chibara tupai, sipe sale jawa varsho. Okay, so that's it for this session. It will be online in a week or two. If you need a recap, or you can buy the book. We have copies of Restoring the Balance, and then you can study it at your leisure. But yeah, the idea is to use it. It's not just another form of entertainment for a couple of hours. It's to be used in your life, and hopefully then that will fulfill. We're living the legacy, not just reading about it or talking about it, but actually living it ourselves. Anyway, good luck with all that, and I'll see you next time.